Okay, everybody, so today we're speaking about the Gilded Age. What is the Gilded Age? This is a kind of a weird name, but it was given by Mark Twain in 1873 to this season, to this time in which the United States of America were going through a time of reconstruction after the war between the 1870s and 1890s. The country started to have a brief growing in economics, right? Also, the industry started to grow up a lot, and so people started to migrate from the country to the cities where the industries were having place. It is called the Golden Age in the United States because, of course, this land was very fertile, and people started to take advantage. Of course, a lot of Europeans came to America in that time. People that had no land started to come to the United States of America. Especially the salaries, talking about to the qualified workers, were a lot better than Europe. So that is why thousands of millions, or maybe not thousands, millions of immigrants started to come down here to the America. At least 48% of the population grew until the 1880s to 1890s. So people that could not get a job were not simply poor just because they could not get a job. That, talking about in the north, economically in the south, the United States was being devastated. So the economy in the United States started to focus more on cotton, a lot of cotton, tobacco, also very important. People that came from the Africa, they were their rights started to be like more limited, more than they were before. People started to work at least 8 hours every day. The women in the United States acquired the right to voting, which was one of the great aspects in this time. Also, education had a great impact after this because hospitals and schools, local schools, the governments of the states started to pay for everything. Also, the taxes were very high at this time. Okay, let's talk about a little bit of technological advances. The Gilded Age was a period of economic growth in the United States. Why? Because the United States started to compete against England. England, of course, was one of the powers of the time, and now the United States started to work a lot with the railroads. They built all these railroads that we're going to see later throughout the video. Very important for not only transportation, but only the transportation of the industry. A lot of factories, a lot of coal mining. In 1869, the Transcontinental Railroad opened. That was from New York to San Francisco. Very huge distance. It took 6 days instead of 6 months now. That was a very good advance for not only economics but also politics, because now information could be transferred even faster than before. So the lineage of the railroad between the 1860s to 1880s got tripled. That is great for them. Okay. Now let's talk about a little bit about the railroads. Okay, it says that Henry Adams said that the engines of a generation, they call them the engines of a generation. Of course, they were powered with steam, machinery, banks, and of course mining, cotton, even people. We have seen in these movies, for example, a lot of the old West movies talk about these red rules because of their importance. About politics at this time, the Gilded Age, they established the third party system. Um, they featured intense competition between major parties. Of course, the Labor parties fighting against the Democrats and the Republicans. So a lot of activists started to fight against these economical movements because economics started to have huge issues. Okay, so now let's talk about the naturalism. Naturalism is a movement that emphasizes its observation and scientific method and the fictional portrayal of reality. This is about more believing in some way that, for example, about politics, that God has ruled and that has given the laws. So people could leave behind or under the supposition, which is true actually, that God has given laws to live peacefully and to live in prosperity. That is about politics, but about literary movements. This movement started to portray the reality, the nature as it is, the humanity as it is. Okay. About humanity, we can say that the poverty, the prostitution, the racism, the violence were criticized for being pandemic. That means a lot of people started to criticize the way people were living. This kind of literature also shows those aspects of life which are pretty dark. So about there is a paradox of the naturalism that says that there are two conflicts between the human, and it says human behavior is a result of a free will, and it is also determined by the natural laws. So basically what they're saying there is that we do have our free will because I decide what to do, but also those rights are refrained by natural laws. Not killing, not stealing, not desiring the wife of my friend, loving everybody. Now, there was another stream coming down, which is called the realism. The realism in the arts is an attempt to represent subject matter truthfully without artificially avoiding artistic conventions and plus exotic supernatural elements. So the realism also kind of tries to show that ugly part of the society, of the world that we live in. For example, of course, the arts were very influenced by the Italian freedom in all aspects, about art, about literature, about paintings, sculptures, for example. French also, literature, French art was very important at the time. Why? Because of course they are the old continent, and they were still having a very big importance in American society yet. Now it's time to speak about the lost generation. The lost generation. It was a generation that came in which the World War, now we're speaking, we're speaking about the 1883 to the 900s. It was before, before the war, a couple of years before the war, in which industry grew a lot more. The industry grew very, very fast at these times. Why? Because of the invention of the cars first, the engine, the oil engine. At this time, Ernest Hemingway appears into the picture. There are a thousand, well, not a thousand, but a couple of tens of good authors. For example, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ella James Joyce, Olaf Stapleton, Sherwood Anderson, John Dos Passos, John Steinbeck, William Faulkner, E. Cummings, Hart Crane, Dunja Burns, Glenway Westcott, Waldo Peirce, Abraham Wolskowitz, Ezra Pound, Alan Seeger, Henry Miller, Aldous Huxley, couple more. Aldous Wicks, Malcolm Conley, Louis Ferdinand Celine, Eric Maria Remarque, J.R.R. Tolkien, C.C. Lewis, and the composers of Sergei Prokofiev. Okay, that is about authors at this time in the lost generation. So about the literary themes, more the most played and written about the time. They tend to use more common themes in their writings. For example, these themes mostly pertain to the writers. For example, talking about the World War and the years following. A lot of authors started to write their autobiographical works based on the use of, the frivolous lifestyle. So there are two main characters at this time. One of them it's Hemingway, and the other one is Fitzgerald. They have great novels at this time. One of the most famous is The Great Gatsby, who this novel talks about one gentleman that in his younger years met a girl and he fell in love with her, and they promised to be together, but she got married with another guy, and so later on he becomes a millionaire and he buys a house right in front of her house across the lake, so he could be very close to her and pay a lot of attention to her, to all their actions, to their husband. Also, he would offer one of some of the greatest parties in town. So all of the millionaires and all of the important people would go to his place to have parties. But sometimes he would feel very empty because all he wanted was look for her and to find her and to get married with her. Along the story, a lot of crazy stuff happened. For example, the husband of the lady he was in love with has an affair with a non-very wealthy woman, and finally she gets killed by accident. So we see here that the topics, the themes are a little bit more raw than they used to be before. Also, police novels and dramas start to appear and to have importance. Now finally, let's talk about the African American writers. We'll see. This is a very, very nice age of the literature, the black literature, because these African Americans started to state their discontent with the product of their pretty much their whole life in the United States in America, because they they realized that they were Africans. Yes, and they were being enslaved here they were being treated as slaves as they were, mostly in the South. So after the emancipation, after the 18th century, writers such as Phyllis Wheatley, such well, for now, him. They used to write about their music. They used to write about their culture, how strong it was. There comes something called the Harlem Renaissance, and it was a time in which this African Americans started to have a great role, not only in music and poetry, but also politics. For example, we see the example of, let's say, Martin Luther King Jr. and also Malcolm X in politics. So they started to move the mass, they started to move people towards the acceptation of themselves between a society that was punishing them just because they were born black. Also at this time, a lot of segregation happened in the United States. There were the buses, there were seats for African Americans and also seats for whites. Also the drinking fountains, they were segregated for the whites and for the blacks, as they call them. They call them Negroes, which for them is a very rude word not to be said. So over the centuries, we can see that the literature and the arts had changed a lot. The literature and the music had not been recognized so far until there comes a Nobel Prize to Toni Morrison. So a lot of the issues like racism and slavery started to come more vividly to the American society. So after they being enslaved, after they being hid, after these African Americans being treated as animals, because if you remember, the Declaration of Independence talk about people, that all people are created equally. But at this time, these African Americans were not considered people; they were considered animals. So they started to compose rhymes about the music, and the blues comes, and the rap comes, but later on, and all these beautiful songs about, for example, Georgia in my mind. I remember one of them, which I used to love to listen to this song, which the singer reminds us how Georgia, how beautiful Georgia is. So this black population now, they are taking their place in society. And just to finish, about feminism also, it's a very important topic to talk about throughout this time, and about the literature that started to become more, not obvious, but became more aware also of the feminist revolution that had happened in Europe early on. So the Black Panthers appeared. It was kind of a gang of black men and women who started to fight for their rights, to gain everything with fighting and with marching. So I'm going to read a little bit here, and it says, the early Republic African American literature represented a way for free blacks to negotiate their identity in an individualized republic. They're often try to exercise their political and social autonomy in the face of resistance from their white public. Thus, an early theme American was literature. The other American writers that meant to be citizen in post-revolutionary American. That also means that they got tired of being just the ones behind, being treated like animals, and then they started to demand their rights. So this has been it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and see you in the next time.